Hey everyone, thank you for coming and thank you for taking the time to be with us today. It's an absolute pleasure to speak with you again. Appreciate the opportunity. Very excited to give you guys some tools that you can take away, hopefully, and that can assist in your job search and overall career progression. This is part 2 of a 3-part series titled The Building Blocks of a Successful Job Application. Today, our focus is going to be on understanding the importance of and perfecting the art of networking and recruiting. We previously looked at and honed our resume skills and talked through how best to go about building a resume, which is always really the foundation of any successful job application. Today, it's all about action and initiative that you need to take to go out there, put yourself out there, and land, the dream role that you want to land in whatever industry that may be. So before we get started, just a quick background on myself. Obviously, my name is Olner Kasimlaka. I work as an investment associate at Mile Rock Capital. Mile Rock is a real estate private equity firm headquartered out of San Francisco, California. Mile Rock invests predominantly in affordable housing, but can invest in essentially any real estate across the country. I'm originally from Toronto and grew up attending Upper Canada College. Proceeded to do my undergraduate degree at NYU Stern in New York, where I studied finance and real estate. And prior to my current role as an investor with Mile Rock, I worked with Sterling Organization, a retail-focused real estate investment company out of West Palm Beach, Florida. So, quick discussion overview for what we're going to be talking about today. I'll just give a high-level take on networking and recruiting and an overview of our discussion. I'm going to get into how to really go about building your network. So coffee chats, conversations that you need to be having and scheduling, how to track those interactions, some quick follow-up tips from our last session on the resume, as well as social media do and don'ts. And then the second half of the presentation, talking about interview success and the things you need to be doing as it relates to preparation, both on the qualitative and behavioral side, but also on the quantitative side, depending on the industry that you're in or you're trying to potentially break into. So, high level, why is networking important? We're in an environment right now that is increasingly competitive. You have technology that's enabling greater access to opportunities. And I think with remote work, that's only stood to catapult that into a whole nother stratosphere of competitiveness, because anyone from anywhere can technically apply for any job now. Cities aren't really, and geographic location isn't really a constraint. So, as you think about your own career trajectory, you're competing with people from a ton of diverse backgrounds, all of whom are well qualified. So how do you stand out? Depending on the industry you're trying to break into, you could be competing with 100 other people, 500 other people in some highly coveted, lucrative industries, working at Google and Facebook. You're competing with thousands and thousands of other people. So as a result, it's important to know that for any role you're going for, applying online just isn't enough anymore. You may get lucky, and you may hear of cases where just applying online leads to an interview, and you're able to just kind of go from there. It's not always the case anymore, and so in these cases, you want to do whatever you can to maximize your chances for success. Hoping your resume gets picked out of a pile of 500 or 1,000 applications is almost akin to winning the job interview lottery. So the best thing you can do is to get your name out there in your respective industries, form connections for today's opportunities, but also open the door for future and tomorrow's opportunities. The only way to do that is to network. While sometimes networking may seem redundant or not helpful in the moment, I can't tell you how many stories I've heard of people who've networked, in college, and years later, or in their undergraduate kind of time, or even younger. And years later, when they're in their mid-20s, late 20s, those same connections have come back to them and followed through with opportunities that emerge just from these age-old conversations and connections. So you never know where anything can take you, and it's always better to put yourself out there than to not. Opportunities aren't found on the computer; they're found through people, and so that's a key point to remember, and something that I wanted to highlight as we set the stage for our discussion. So how do you network? We hear the buzzword thrown around a lot, right? But what does it mean practically? It's a 6-step process, I would say. I think you can boil it down into potentially 6 steps. It may seem like a lot of work at the start, but trust me, you'll save a ton of time on the back end. If you make sure that you are seamless and organized in your recruiting and networking execution. So I'd say the first step is to build a tracker, right? Once you've identified, obviously, the industry you're trying to work for and the kind of overall field that you're trying to break into, put a tracker together, right? We'll get into an example later. But in this tracker, you'll want to flag who you're talking to, the company that they're from, when you spoke to them last, and some notes and comments on your interaction so that you can use those as talking points when you follow up. The next thing you want to do is find people to fill that tracker with. So, look through company profiles that you're interested in on LinkedIn, find people who work at those companies that you have some sort of connection to or you can relate to, right? Whether they're from the same hometown as you, whether they went to the same high school or university as you, whether or not you just have mutual friends. These are all great talking points that you can use and will give you an instant connection once you've reached out to them. So they'll be more likely to respond to you, and once you've identified kind of that list of people that you want to reach out to and speak to, there are a couple of ways you can go about reaching out to them. If you have mutual connections, go through your contacts or your friends who can introduce you. But if not, you can message them right on LinkedIn, which is also a paid service. So if you don't have that, if neither of those options are available to you, you can just find their emails. And I think this is often underlooked. I would say finding out an email format of a company is tedious and it's potentially time consuming, but it's not impossible. So find the email format of the company that they work for. Usually you'll find it's some sort of, initial and last name combination, whether it's a first name initial and a last name, or first name dot last name at yorkuniversity.com, whatever the email format is for that respective company. You can find it out and then use that person's name. What I would not recommend doing is finding someone's social media like Facebook or Instagram and messaging them there. Some people may view this as an intrusion. Some people may view it as unprofessional. Some people like to keep their social life and their professional life separate. So keep that in mind. I would say that's maybe a last resort if nothing else is working. But once you have a method of contacting them, draft up an introductory email, introduce yourself in that email, talk about your background, as well as why you're looking to connect with them and what you're hoping to achieve out of that conversation or interaction. You want to be clear, you want to be direct, and you want to be concise. Long-winded emails that are 4 or 5 paragraphs long will only maximize the chances and likelihood that they ignore your email. So make sure that you are able to fit it into no more than 3 or 4 sentences, and be very, very direct and to the point in what your ask is. From there, you'll likely have a little exchange back and forth where you iron out meeting logistics. And once you're there in person, or, you know, in a non-COVID world on Zoom with the person, or in a COVID world on Zoom, be sure not to forget your original intent for the conversation. Oftentimes when a conversation is great and going smoothly, you'll get carried away by the momentum of it, only to, in the end, leave the interaction and have not actually gone there and executed on your initial intentions. You've forgotten about what your ask was that led you to reaching out. So make sure that you're able to formulate a list of questions and goals for the conversation or the interaction, and make sure that throughout the conversation, the half hour or the 20 minutes that you're meeting with the person, you're able to try and hit every one of those benchmarks that you've set out to hit. Whether it's an introduction to a hiring manager or having your resume flagged in a hiring process, you have to make sure that the conversation or the coffee chat goes to somewhere and it leads to the inevitable ask for support or for help. So next up, just a little breakdown on coffee chats and how to go about navigating those. What are they? How important are they? How do you have them? How do you prepare for them? These coffee chats are really a chance for you to meet the person who's going to be your key and your ticket potentially into these opportunities, and it's a chance for them to meet the person behind the paper, if you know, the paper being your resume. I mentioned this last time in the first session, but the resume is important because it's the first impression that someone may have of you. But nobody will remember you because of your resume once they've met you. They'll always remember their interaction with you. A positive interaction can help you overcome maybe a mediocre or a substandard resume, but a poor interaction cannot help you overcome even having a fantastic resume. So this is an opportunity for you to impress the people that work at the company that you want to work at. Even if they aren't a hiring manager, remember that whatever way your conversation goes, whatever you say, and whatever the experience is for both you and them, positive or negative, can not only influence the hiring process through the feedback that they can provide on you, but also, even if it doesn't, you may end up being coworkers with this person one day if you're inevitably successful in your job application and job search for that role. So keep that in mind. You may be working hand in hand with this person for the next number of years. So you want to be prepared beforehand when you go in. You want to do your research and try and have a 1 to 2 minute kind of introduction on yourself. Kind of like a tell me about yourself response. Ask interesting questions that'll get the other person talking, and take lots of notes when you speak to them, because these are talking points that you can use as they describe their experience for you when you want to talk about why you're interested in the role. You can say, well, I spoke to XYZ person from this company, and they told me how inclusive the culture was. They told me how much they've grown since they started at the company, how it's a very mentoring and team-oriented environment. These nuanced details that you get only from interacting with people who are living and breathing the role today can really separate you and show a hiring manager that you not only have done your due diligence and research as it relates to the opportunity, but also that you have a genuine interest in the role. And then in terms of logistics, you want to reach out, coordinate a time and place via email to meet. You want to dress well. Remember that this is a professional meeting with a potential coworker. So, when you're trying to set up a meeting with this person, obviously you want to be professional and, in a non-COVID world, give and take, hopefully once this is all past us, I would say overwhelmingly try to meet in person as opposed to on Zoom. I think we're all seeing that today, how much more meaningful relationships can be in person. So really try and facilitate an in-person introduction. I think now more than ever, it may mean a lot that you've put in the effort to, come downtown or go out of your way to meet someone in person. It could really go the extra mile and separate you. So just move this out of the way for everyone. So how do you set them up? Obviously, and we talked about it, reach out via email well in advance. If they don't respond to you, be sure to follow up, but no earlier than 3 days before. And we talked about in-person versus phone and how to dress. So here's an example email that you can use when trying to reach out cold and facilitate a coffee chat. Hey, Jason, my name is whatever your name is. In this case, it's John Snow. John Snow is a second-year undergraduate student at York, so you're giving a bit of context on yourself. And then you're right to the point. I'm interested in pursuing a career at XYZ firm, in this case at KPMG, in an accounting role, and came across your profile through the alumni network. I was hoping to speak with you more about your path to KPMG, so you're being concise, getting right to the point about what your ask is and what you want to learn from them, and your experience at the firm to date. If you have some time over the next few days, is there any chance we could find a time to speak? Happy to work around your schedule and find a time that works. So you see here, it's simple, it's concise, it's to the point, it's not too long, it's easy to read. Spelling is in line. Make sure that you proofread your emails. There's nothing worse than when you're trying to make an impression on someone and there's a spelling error or grammatical error in the email. So be sure to look out for that. And what I would not recommend doing is sending batch mass emails to tons of people from the same company. Oftentimes, especially if you're going for a specific role within a bigger company or specific group or kind of team, these people all interact on a daily basis. They, in a non-COVID world, will sit next to each other in the office. And if they all get emails on the same day from, John Snow, it'll just kind of look like you're not being genuine in your intention. It's more like you're just casting a wide net and trying to, throw darts at a dartboard, as opposed to being selective and finding and trying to connect with people who you genuinely have, potentially mutual interests or mutual connections with. So be mindful of that, and that is something that you want to be conscious of when you're in your outreach stage. And don't get disheartened if you don't get responses right away. You can always follow up, and if after a couple tries or a couple weeks that nobody responds or that your contact doesn't respond, then you move on to someone else. But don't do 5-10 people at once. So in terms of tracking interactions, now this is a little bit more bank specific, but really this is very flexible across any interaction, any industry. This is an example of how you can track. Hopefully your list is a little bit longer than just 3, but the things you want to track are obviously the firms that you're interacting with, so you can see the number of people that you've interacted with in any given firm. The easiest way to do this I would recommend is just put together an Excel spreadsheet. And have it be organized, filter through. You want to have your contacts, in this case, Kyle Lowry, Austin Matthews, and Danny Green, their title within the firm, their email address, who introduced you guys, your mutual connection, if any, the date of your last interaction. This is actually pretty important because you could have multiple interactions with that same person. And so you want to document that. And have kind of different lines for each interaction, so you can kind of see how you've tracked and how you've progressed with that one contact or relationship, because there could be multiple data points that you want to refer back to, say in an interview, where you can go and say, look, I've talked to Austin Matthews from Barclays Bank or whatever 5 times in the last 6 months. And, you know, you can really demonstrate how interested you are in the role and how consistent you've been in your interest in outreach. And that can go a long way in impressing a hiring manager. So you want to document everything you can. And then obviously some commentary on how your interaction went and any next steps. So on to the resume. Here's a quick refresher for you on the anatomy of the resume. You know, we know that they're important, but you know, in this case, how do they tie into the recruiting and interview process? Resumes are critical during the networking and outreach phase because really even before someone meets with you after you've scheduled that initial coffee chat, in my experience, I'll often get an email saying, hey, in advance of our sitting down, wanted to learn a little bit more about your background, could you just shoot me over your resume? And so even before you get into this coffee chat, before this person has met you, before this person has sat down with you and met you face to face and developed an impression of you in terms of who you are as a person, they'll already have judgments and assessments made based on your resume. And so you want to be really mindful of that. You know, they do serve an important function. Sometimes in a coffee chat, you know, they may ask you questions about your resume, so you want to be sure that you're prepared and that your resume has, you know, a narrative to it that you want to portray. And you know, this is really your chance to show off and highlight your experiences, so that, you know, they garner some interest and they see that you're a really legitimate candidate for whatever role that you're trying to break into. So, quick refresher on the anatomy of an effective resume. It can be broken down into 4 parts. The first part is formatting and etiquette. We have, you know, talked about this at length in the last session, but there are definitely do's and don'ts when it comes to resume writing. It is something that people often overlook, but as I mentioned, a lot of questions around organization and attention to detail and, you know, diligence are answered here through formatting. So make sure that you know, your resume is clean, it's well formatted with no, you know, spelling mistakes or grammatical errors. It'll go a long way in showing you know, that you care and that you have you know, the skills to succeed in whatever role you're going for. The second is the experience section. This is where you can highlight all of your fantastic prior work experiences. If you have, you know, it's particularly important if you're a few years removed from school. Most employers will focus 70–80% of their time reading your resume on this section. Truthfully, here's where you can really demonstrate what value that you can add. You can talk about your prior work experiences and, more importantly, what your specific role was during those experiences, how you helped your teams in those roles, how you showed leadership and took initiative. This is where you can highlight some of your qualities that can really differentiate you in a hiring process. And ideally, it should tell a bit of a story and a narrative as to what led you to applying for the particular role you're applying for. So if you're looking to work in accounting at a big 4, you know, firm like KPMG or Ernst & Young, you can show a track record of working at smaller, more maybe mom and pop boutique firms or boutique, you know, businesses as an accountant, where you've built your pedigree up, you've built up your experiences, and now you want to go to one of the big 4 and really learn and be part of, you know, a fantastic company at a scale. And so, you know, your prior experiences can do a good job in telling a story. The third section is the education section. This is really, really important for recent graduates and students. Here's where you can highlight the initiative and those same qualities that we talked about on work experiences. You can highlight those on in your education section, and you can highlight the initiative you've taken both informally and formally at your schools or respective kind of education in your education experiences. What coursework did you take in school? Even if you didn't end up going to university, what training have you done outside of any formal education setting like high school? It showed what initiative have you taken. If you want to break into the real estate industry, well, maybe you didn't go to university, but did you do a broker course, or did you do a real estate project management course? Have you taken any certification courses? Show that you've taken initiative. Show that you've gone out of your way to gain practical experiences outside of a formal education context. This is where you can really separate yourself. And then even within those organizations, academic institutions, have you taken on leadership? Have you been involved in clubs? Have you helped other students and been a leader in the classroom? These are all things that you can highlight in your education experiences that can help separate you from other candidates. And then lastly, and very important and not to be overlooked is the personal interest section. People want to know who you are as a person. Will you be someone that they want to see every single day when they go into the office, 5-6 days a week? Will you be a good fit on the team? Do you have a good sense of humor? Interviewers and hiring managers will often look to this section to understand those questions. And so it's super important that you do a good job of trying to isolate, key ideas, key interests that will separate you and show a bit of personality. You don't want to use mundane interest. To go back to the accounting example, if you're going for an accounting firm, you don't want to put math, unless it's like you're very, very, very passionate about math and you're a math whiz and champion. You want to put something that's a little bit more playful, a little bit more humorous, that can really genuinely show who you are and shed a bit of light on your personality. So I often like to use cooking on my resume because I love cooking, particularly breakfast. And I've done a couple cooking master classes, so I like to put that on my resume. And I have a section that I have a blurb that says cooking, and in parentheses, Gordon Ramsay's masterclass. And I have my certificate. I'm very, very proud to say. So that's the kind of thing you can put on to kind of just add some cheer and add some light and color to your resume. And it'll hopefully get your hiring manager to chuckle and again separate you from other candidates. So quickly, tips and best practices. You want to keep it simple. You want to keep it concise, but everything on your resume is fair game in a discussion, both in a coffee chat and a formal interview. And really, these coffee chats, I would honestly approach them as if they are informal, call it first round interviews, because it essentially is a screening. If it goes very poorly, chances are the person that you're meeting with will not vouch for you or want to connect you with, a hiring manager. And so, really treat it as if it is an interview and approach it that way with the same level of care and attention to detail and preparation, because it could really determine how far you go in a process, whether you know it or not at that point. So with that in mind, prepare, know your resume really well. Someone may point at any given experience. Everything on the resume is fair game. So something you did 4 or 5 years ago may come up in a conversation. So make sure you can speak to everything that you put on the page. You should have an anecdote to talk about and an experience to share. Have the resume reviewed by peers and mentors, ideally in the same industry. You'd want to find people who have been through similar processes or even been through processes at that company and have them give you feedback. It could go a long way, because oftentimes companies will look for certain qualities and certain characteristics, and they can help you shape that resume to kind of depict whatever that given company is looking for. Include interests, obviously keep them appropriate, but give a hiring manager a sense of your personality, as I mentioned earlier with that cooking example. and then proofread and ensure that there are no grammatical or punctuation errors. Obviously, that's super important, and we've discussed at length why that is. Couple don'ts. Do not lie or overstate on the resume. You know, I think this goes without saying, but there's really no reason and no excuse to overstate or lie. You remember, you're trying to build a relationship and a level of trust with the people that you're going to work with, and you know, even if you get by and you somehow, you know, get through with, you know, a hiring process and land a role, you know, by lying or overstating on your resume, is that really how you want to start your relationship with these people, your fellow coworkers who have shown you trust, frankly, by giving you an opportunity? So, you know, be upfront and be candid about your experiences to date. Don't overstate. Don't put high school if you've already been to university or college. It just seems a little bit redundant, and it's frankly too far back. If you don't end up going to university or college, then keep high school on. It is a relevant data point then. But again, you know, if you're a couple of years removed and you've gone the undergraduate university degree route, then no need. Career goals. This is something that people do put on, but it's not necessarily a relevant data point for a hiring manager. You're not going to be hired because of your future career goals. You're often going to be hired for what you've done to date. That's why a resume is always kind of past looking, and it's always a perspective into previous experience, not obviously future experience. So keep that in mind, that it's not really what the purpose of a resume or the purpose of a resume is for, but if you wanted to highlight your career goals, often a cover letter can do a better job of doing that, which is just a separate kind of document where you can highlight your experiences to date and how they tie into your long-term career goals, as well as how that company ties into your long-term career goals, and kind of bringing it all together in a written format. So I would say use the cover letter for that, but definitely not on the resume itself. Photos as well. It's just, you know, best practice. It's just not something that you want to put on. You know, oftentimes, historically and today, potentially discrimination, whatever, all those you know, reasons could be an issue. So you want to be able to be assessed purely on the merit of your candidacy, right? On the merit of what you've done to date and your experiences. And it's just a convention that, you know, for whatever reason, I'm truthfully not too sure, but photos tend to be discouraged on resumes. You don't want to be too wordy and have inconsistent formatting, you know, so be mindful of that. And unprofessional emails, you know, chicken nugget lover 416@gmail.com, an example of something you don't want to put on a resume. Usually just try and use your initials, first name dot last name, or something like that, to be the main kind of contact for your email. So quickly on social media, I think it's very important in today's day and age to have a LinkedIn page. With that said, you want to be wary of how much you put on LinkedIn. You know, oftentimes people mistake LinkedIn to be an online version of a resume. I think it's not. I think that's what a resume is for. I think, you know, LinkedIn should be a more high-level overview. I don't think there's necessarily a need to flesh out, you know, all the bullet points of your role and your experiences on your LinkedIn. Oftentimes, I would just keep it simple, minimize the level of creativity here. You're just trying to stick within the structure that LinkedIn provides. You want to keep it concise and professional with your education and work experiences. Monitor your privacy settings, and don't share excessively. You can see here with Brian Chesky, CEO of Airbnb, that it's very concise, clear explanations, you know, quick highlight of his activities. Showed his major, had a professional photo, and it's just a very clean cut LinkedIn profile. So use this as an example, but really try and cut down and not make it too busy. You know, that's really what the resume is for. You don't want to supplement your resume with your LinkedIn profile. Okay, so now on to the second half, or second part of the discussion, which is interview success. So on the behavioral side, obviously, so maybe taking a step back, interview success can be broken down into two components: qualitative and quantitative, right? Quantitative we'll get into, but it's obviously more nuanced and depends on the industry that you're trying to break into. The more overarching and more applicable component to interviews across pretty much all industries and all sectors is the behaviorals and the qualitative component. There are three kind of key questions that I can almost guarantee that whatever role you're going for in whatever industry, whether it's logistics, law, accounting, finance, you name it, whatever it is, there's almost three questions that you'll get. The first is, tell me about yourself and walk me through your resume. Kind of the same thing, because the answers to both should be very, very similar. You will most definitely be asked this question. You want to rehearse this answer out loud. This should be your longest response, 2 to 3 minutes maximum. And in this response, you want to tell a story and a narrative that is chronological with time and that can show how you got to where you got today. So in a tell me about yourself response, you want to start with where you're from, where you grew up. Maybe if you grew up surrounded by, your parents were in the industry that you want to join, you can say, I grew up around, 2 doctors and I always wanted to be a doctor, or something like that. You talk about you grew up around a certain environment, how you grew up, high school you went to, then you get into where you decided to go for your undergraduate degree, if you pursued that route, and what you majored in, and then you get right into your work experience. And you say, I've since graduating from college or high school, I've done 3 opportunities. I've worked 3 jobs to date. The first was at here, the second was here, the third was here. You want to be structured. And then at the end of that kind of culmination, you tell me about yourself at the end of the 2 minutes, you want to talk about why you're physically there today, and what you are trying to accomplish with or what you're hoping to accomplish with the current role that you're applying for. So keep it chronological, kind of take the interviewer or the hiring manager through a narrative of how you got to where you are today. And really, this should be your longest response. 2 minutes, 3 minutes is pretty long. I'd say honestly, keep it probably 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes. But this is something you want to constantly rehearse and practice in front of the mirror. It's super important, and you'll almost always be asked this question. The second thing that you're probably going to get, regardless of the industry that you're trying to work in, is why do you want to work in said industry? So again, you want to be structured in your response. Right away, you say, there are 2 reasons. The first is, I've grown up around this industry. My parents are in the industry. My brother's in the industry, and I've always had a passion for it since I was a kid. And the second is, I've had extensive experience in related industries, all of which I wanted to use to build a foundation to build up into, breaking into XYZ. Many, many ways you can go around formulating this response. The key is you want it to be structured. You want to be almost signposting your response, saying, okay, I'm going to tell you 2 reasons, and then you go out and list those 2 reasons with a brief description. It shows that you've done your homework on the industry. It shows that you understand what the job you're going for entails. And you can also use this to cite specific conversations you've had during your coffee chats, and leverage those unique reasons. So you can say, well, I know I've talked to many lawyers in the legal field, and I've heard extensively about how gratifying it could be to, help people navigate some of the most difficult situations of their lives. And it's, it's particularly fulfilling, and that's why I want to be a lawyer. I want to work at a law firm. So many, many ways you can go about working that answer together, but you want to make sure you've prepared for that. And then the last thing you'll most likely get asked as well, and it's kind of a follow-on to the second one, is why do you want to work at the XYZ firm? Because you want to make sure you have separate responses for that. Working at KPMG is very different from just wanting to work in accounting. They don't necessarily go hand in hand. And this is where you can highlight really highlight the information that you've gathered through your interactions on coffee chats with people who work at that company. So here you can talk about the culture of the company and why it appeals to you. I mean, hopefully you're going to a firm that, or working for a company that has a culture that appeals to you and that is positive. You can talk about how mentoring the environment is, how team-oriented the environment is, and really, leverage the interactions to date as data points. You can say, I've spoken extensively with so-and-so, this person, that person, and they told me, how positive it's been for them, how much they've learned and grown under the role, how much leadership they've been able to take on. And this is why it's appealing to me. I think, this firm will give me the opportunity to have a similar experience. So you make sure you really want to have that answer dialed in as well, because you're definitely going to get, likely both questions. And then just to wrap up on the technical side, obviously we're not going to get too in-depth into this because it is subjective. It does depend on the industry that you're in. It varies whether you're trying to break into, a STEM field, engineering, or you're trying to break into business and finance, or you're trying to break into, law or medicine. It's all different. It's all nuanced. So, it wouldn't be helpful for me to try and dive into that. I'm no expert in many, if not all of those fields. So I think the biggest pieces of advice that I can give you as it relates to technical preparation and call it quantitative preparation, depending if that's relevant, is prepare. Just prepare. You want to know the industry standard questions that are asked. The best way to do that is, again, to reach out to people through your coffee chats who have done these interviews and who've lived the role and been through these processes. So make that a point to bring up during your coffee chats. How was your experience? You can actually ask up front, how was your experience during the interview process? How did you prepare? Was there anything in particular that I need to prepare for? And that's where that information will come up, because the worst thing that can happen is you're blindsided and all of a sudden you get some very technical question about, a specific industry that you have, you would know if you prepared for it, but you just didn't know that you were going to be asked, and you can either get flustered or you just don't know the answer. So make sure that you do your homework there. Ask what type of preparation is needed. The other things you can do is, Google for interview experiences. There are websites online like Glassdoor where people can post their kind of reviews and experiences recruiting at different companies. And so really the best way, one of the really easy ways to find out what you're going to be asked in an interview is to just Google and find out, what questions are like. Likelihood is, most of these questions will be repeated from interviews, and there are, kind of standard questions, and I doubt they'll change that much. And so it can kind of give you just an insight into how to prepare at the very least. Look for online guides and resources, if available, to help master what you need to know. So I can tell you, at least from my perspective on the business side and the finance side, there are tons of resources available online. Khan Academy is a great resource. I think Khan Academy it covers pretty much every field at this point that you could think of. As it relates to technical knowledge and technical preparation. So figure out the best resources that are available to you. YouTube is also fantastic for finding kind of coaching and preparation videos. So you can use that to try and get well versed. And then lastly, technical questions won't land you a job if you get them all right? But getting them wrong in a competitive process where other people get them all right can certainly disqualify you. So while it's not the be all end all in terms of landing you a job, it could go a long way in hurting your chances if you don't prepare, for those questions. So take them seriously. Obviously, it's who you are and who you are as a person and how you come across that's going to land you that role, whether or not you're liked by the team and you're a team player and you can fit in. Fit is obviously going to be the most important question, but technical savvy and technical understanding is very, very important and could be a major determinant of success. That's it from my end. I think Sonia had mentioned there may be questions at the end. Happy to answer absolutely anything I can to to help best prepare you guys.
Thank you so much, Laura. Yes, we do have some questions and I'll read them out quickly. So everyone, please make your questions short and concise so we can go through them quickly. There's quite a few here. How do you find connections with some mutual interests or friends when you're new to the country and you don't know anyone and no one knows you?
Totally, that's a great question. So, honestly, I'd say potentially, so there's a couple of ways you can go about it. The first thing is you can, from wherever you came from, whatever country you came from, right? You can find out if there are people who have also moved from those countries. And you can see all of this on LinkedIn, right? You can see kind of where someone went to school or where someone grew up in their hometown, and try and just find people who are from similar backgrounds or similar countries, and reach out to them cold, right? That's something you can do as well. The second thing you can do is just outreach to anyone you know in the industry, right? And say, hey, I'm coming from such and such place. Do you know anyone from a similar background from me? When you're in that situation, it's probably one of the hardest situations to be in. I would say the more initiative you take and the more you do to get yourself out there, the better you're going to be. So really taking and having the confidence and garnering the confidence, and it's tough to do, to just put yourself out there, especially if you know absolutely no one. Like really just throw yourself into the deep end. The worst thing that can happen is someone ignores your email or they say no, right? That's the absolute worst thing that can happen. In the best case scenario, it can open up an opportunity for you. So you really have nothing to lose at that point. I would say just go even harder and really just try and outreach as much as you can to as many people as you can who have some sort of background that's similar, or even just mutual interests. Try and leverage whatever you can.
Thank you. And is it okay to email through LinkedIn, or is it better to find an email ID of the person and then email them from your own email?
Yeah, so I mean, great question. I would say, so I know LinkedIn has kind of some nuances around, paid subscriptions, and there's a cap on however many people you can message on LinkedIn if you don't have their paid service. So the way I would strategically go about it is if you can find an email for a person, use that and save those LinkedIn messages for the people whose email you can't find, because there are times where you may not be able to figure out an email ID for a person, but that person may be very helpful for you. So I would say defer to email. People are just more likely to respond to you over email, in my experience, and save those few coveted LinkedIn message opportunities for whenever you're not able to find an email for someone online.
Thank you. And if someone doesn't reply to your email, how many times is it okay to follow up?
Yeah, I mean, great question. I think, you don't want to be too persistent. There is, obviously, you don't want to come across as being kind of overwhelming. So I would say definitely be patient. People are busy, people have work, people have commitments and their own kind of lives to lead. So I would say give, 3 days to a week after your initial email. If there's no response, maybe send a follow-up after a week. And then if you don't hear back, maybe 2 or 3 weeks after that, one last follow-up email, but never really more than 3. And honestly, to be fair, maybe even 2 times if they haven't responded. It's best to just move on to the next lead and opportunity.
Thank you. And how do you approach in a resume or an interview if you're applying for your first job, or if you've had a gap for over 2 years after graduating?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, it's something that's not. First of all, it's something that's not uncommon at all. Many people have gaps on their resume as it relates to just taking time off. It could be voluntary, involuntary, whatever the reasoning is. I would say the best thing you can do is be able to talk about it and articulate the reasons why it happened, whatever they may be able to talk through, articulately and have a well thought out reason as to why. And then also show the initiative that you took outside of a formal work context. just because you weren't working in a formal job setting doesn't mean you weren't growing, doesn't mean you weren't, actively engaging and trying to build your skill set. So highlight the things you did do during whatever that time off, or highlight the experiences that you went through, whether it's, whether you traveled, whether you had to, overcome some family issues, whatever the experiences were, those experiences, if you can frame them as growth experiences and frame them as positives and show how they helped you in the long run and got you to where you are today, there's nothing to worry about. As long as you can articulately defend and talk through why that gap exists on your resume, and also highlight the steps you did take during that time off, you should be good to go. It should be, it shouldn't be a hindrance at all. And hiring managers will be understanding to those situations.
Thank you. If there's a job posted by someone, should you be messaging that person to try to build a relationship with that person, or should you just send like a friendly message saying, hey, I applied for this position, here's a bit more about me? How should you go about it?
Yeah, I think there's just no harm whatsoever in trying to do that. I think that, the more proactive you are, the better. I would say figure out if the person who posted the job is actually the hiring manager. If you can do that homework earlier on, before kind of, spending time on that connection interaction, then great. If that person is the hiring manager, then absolutely you should. If they're not, maybe you use that as an opportunity to just say, hey, I'm really interested in this role. I saw you had posted it. Who would you recommend I be speaking to from your team or on your side that could help me navigate the hiring process? So yes, the answer to should I always reach out, whatever the context, my answer will always be yes. It's always better to do it than to not. The only harm that can come from reaching out and outreach is someone says no. It's in my opinion, almost a no-lose situation.
Thank you. And what's a good length for resumes in your experience?
For sure. So I would first off recommend looking, I think it's online. And if you need the link, please message me or Sonia. But I think there's a webinar that I did last time on the resume that you can use as a resource to help you build yours. But to answer your question, one page, really avoid going longer than one single-sided page, unless you're a professor or you're an academic and you're working in the kind of research and university sector where you have, pages and pages of theses and research that you've been working on and different experiences. Like there's really no reason why it should be longer than one page single-sided. That's an industry, like a standard kind of hiring convention. I've only ever seen multi-page resumes in the field of academia.
Thank you so much. And yes, if you do want to check out Alnoor's webinar that he did on resumes, you can go to our YouTube channel and look for the playlist for Job Search Webinars 2021, and you'll be able to find it there. I'll do one last question here. Who should you connect with when you're trying to, connect with people on LinkedIn? Someone working at the same level in the desired organization or the level above, a team leader or HR?
That's a fantastic question. So I would say it depends what you're trying to achieve. If you're trying to learn more about the role, you say you're not sure, and you want to understand what a day in the life could be like for you in a specific role at a specific company, I would say reach out to people, assuming you're a junior person, reach out to people at that same level as you, because you want to understand and you want to learn more about what the life that they live and their experiences that they're living, because that's going to be the best predictor for what your experience is going to be like. So it depends on what you're trying to get out of it. If you already know that you want to work at XYZ company in XYZ role and you're dead set on that, it's your dream job, then I would just say go higher up. And there's no need to talk to people who are at your level, because you already know and you're already confident in the experience that you're going to have and that you want to have. I would say then go higher up, go to more senior people, managers, and reach out to them and really try and build a relationship with them, because they're the decision makers. At the end of the day, in my experience at these larger companies, HR will not hire someone without at the very least, getting input and advice from the actual teams that are hiring. So, just to give an example, say there's like a managerial or something, a real estate accounting role that KPMG is hiring for. HR will not hire an accountant without getting input from the real estate accounting team at KPMG. Usually, I'm using KPMG as an example. I have obviously no affiliation with them, but that's just kind of in my experience how it works. HR won't make those decisions without input from the team. And so the more you can liaison with the team, the better. The best thing you can do as it relates to HR is just trying to get your foot into a process and understanding kind of logistics and timing. But to really build a relationship with the team and the people who, in the end will be key influential decision makers in a hiring process, you want to reach out to them.
That was so well explained. Thank you so much, Elnor. I'll let you wrap up before I take over the screen.
No, I mean, that's it from my end. Again, please send me a note if you have any questions. Happy to answer anything. My email is alakha3@gmail.com, alakha3@gmail.com. Feel free to email any questions you have, and I'd be happy to talk through them. And thanks again for coming. Really appreciate it.